The email came early in the morning, short, cold, and formal. Dear Ms. Clara Evans, thank you for applying to the marketing director position at Hendricks & Rowe. After careful review, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. We wish you success in your future career. That was it. No interview. No feedback. No chance. I stared at my laptop screen for a long time, my coffee turning cold. It wasn't just a rejection, it was the dream job. I had spent weeks preparing my application, rewriting my cover letter, and editing every line of my resume. I believed I had a real shot. After all, I'd worked hard for 7 years in small agencies, built marketing campaigns, increased sales, and managed teams. But apparently, it wasn't enough. My heart felt heavy. It wasn't just a company saying, no. It was the world telling me I didn't belong among the big ones. I called my mom that night. She always knew when I was low. Did you get the job? She asked softly. I took a deep breath. No. They didn't even call for an interview. Oh, honey, she said. Maybe something better is waiting. I smiled even though I didn't believe it. That night, I printed the rejection email and taped it to my wall. Not to remind myself of failure, but to remember how it felt to be underestimated. Because one day, I promised myself, they would know my name. I worked harder than ever. If big companies didn't want me, I would build my own path. I started freelancing, helping local stores design ads, build websites, and create online campaigns. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And slowly, people started noticing my work. Then came my first big client, Lumen Tech, a small startup struggling to stay alive. Their product was good, but their brand was invisible. I told them, give me 3 months, and I'll make your name impossible to ignore. And I did. We ran social media campaigns that went viral. We built a loyal audience. Sales jumped 60%. The CEO of Lumen called me into his office one afternoon and said, Clara, you saved us. You should be leading teams, not working alone. That one sentence changed everything. A few months later, I started my own small marketing agency, Evans & Company. It was just me, 2 laptops, and a second-hand coffee machine. But every time I looked at that rejection letter on my wall, I worked harder. Because deep inside I knew. If they couldn't see my worth then, I'd build something so undeniable they'd have to look up. And one day they would. The first 6 months were chaos. My small office had flickering lights, second-hand furniture, and a window that didn't open all the way. But I called it mine, Evans & Company, printed proudly on the glass door. Most days, I worked from sunrise to midnight. I'd handle clients, design campaigns, send invoices, then mop the floor myself before leaving. There were weeks when the only team I had was me and an old laptop that overheated every hour. But I refused to quit. My first big breakthrough came by accident. A local bakery, Sweet Haven, hired me for a 1-month project. They were desperate. Competition had eaten away their profits, and their owner, a kind old man named George, said it was their last shot. I didn't have fancy software or a big team, but I had ideas. We filmed George telling his story, how he started baking after his wife passed, how every pastry recipe was inspired by her. I shared the video online with one line. Every loaf has love in it. Within a week, the video went viral. Thousands of people shared it. Local news picked it up. Customers lined up outside the bakery like it was a concert. George cried when he saw the line. You saved us, Clara, he said, voice trembling. That moment, watching his shop come alive again, was when I realized this wasn't just business. It was purpose. Soon, small businesses across the city started calling me. Florists, mechanics, bookshop owners, even schools, all asking for help. By the end of the year, I hired 2 assistants. Mia, a social media whiz, and Raj, a design genius who could make any ad come alive. Together, we built stories, not just campaigns. We didn't sell products, we sold belief. And belief spreads faster than any algorithm. By the second year, Evans & Company wasn't just surviving, it was growing. We signed regional clients. Our revenue tripled. And people started whispering our name at business mixers, even at those fancy corporate events where real players met. One evening, I received an email from an unfamiliar domain. Hi Clara. I'm Ethan Brooks from Hendricks & Rowe. We're looking for an outside agency to consult on a campaign pitch for a major account. Your firm came highly recommended. I froze. Hendricks & Rowe. The same company that had ignored my application 2 years earlier. At first, I thought it was a prank. But when I opened the attachment, there it was, their official brief, logo and all. They were offering my small agency a consulting contract worth more than I'd made in my first year combined. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. They hadn't just noticed me. They needed me. I accepted, of course. But I made one small change before replying. In the email signature, I wrote, Clara Evans. Founder and Director, Evans & Company. Marketing Group. Not applicant. Not freelancer. Not junior. Founder. When I walked into their boardroom the next week, it felt surreal. The same marble floors. The same golden H&R logo I'd once dreamed of walking past as an employee, now greeting me as a partner. The executives shook my hand. One of them, a tall woman in a gray suit, said, We've heard a lot about your creative strategies, Ms. Evans. We're excited to collaborate. Inside, I smiled. Outside, I stayed calm and professional. Because I knew this was just the beginning. They had ignored me once. Now they were depending on me. But I didn't just want their project. I wanted their seat, at the table, and eventually, at the top. And I had already started planning how to get it. Partnerships are strange things. They start with handshakes, but they're really battles in disguise. For the first few months working with Hendricks & Rowe, I kept my head down and my ears open. I wasn't there to just impress them. I was there to learn. Every meeting, every email, every offhand remark from an executive, I absorbed it all. Who made the real decisions? Who was afraid of risk? Who just wanted to protect their position? It didn't take long to notice the cracks. The CEO, Harold Dean, was a man who lived in the past, obsessed with the good old days when print ads ruled and billboards defined prestige. He hated digital innovation, called it childish. The younger executives, though, whispered behind closed doors. They wanted change. They wanted someone who could lead it. That someone, they didn't know yet, was me. Our first campaign together, a tech product rebrand, became a hit. Their stock rose, media coverage exploded, and clients started flooding in. At the press conference, Harold stood at the podium, taking full credit. He didn't mention me or my agency once. But that was fine. Let him enjoy his applause. I wasn't there for credit. I was there for control. Behind the scenes, I was building alliances. I trained their younger team members on data-driven marketing. I showed them how to use automation tools to boost engagement. I made myself indispensable, not by titles, but by results. Soon, even when Harold wasn't in the room, people started coming to me for decisions. Clara, should we run this concept? Clara, how do we respond to the client? Clara, can you review this pitch before we show Harold? Every Clara they spoke built another thread of influence. One afternoon, during a meeting, one of the board members, a sharp woman named Rachel Lynn, leaned toward me and whispered, You ever think of working here full-time? We could use someone like you. I smiled. Maybe someday. But in my mind, I thought, not as an employee. As your equal. When the contract with Hendricks & Rowe ended, they extended it, twice. And each time, they gave me more authority. Eventually, I was overseeing not just marketing strategy, but brand development, client relations, and investor outreach. At that point, Evans & Company wasn't just their consultant. We were running nearly half of their external communications. One night, as I reviewed a report, Mia, my longtime assistant, looked up from her desk and said, Clara, You realize you're practically running their company, right? I paused, a slow smile forming. That's exactly what I wanted. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Harold announced he was retiring, to focus on family, he said. But everyone knew the truth. Investors wanted someone fresh. A new era, a new direction. The board began searching for a new CEO. Rumors flew. They interviewed outside candidates, but none impressed the younger executives. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel Lynn called me into her office. Clara, she said, you've built more success for this company in 2 years than most of us did in 10. The board wants to know if you'd consider joining, formally. We want your vision. I was silent for a long moment. Then I smiled. I'll consider it, I said. But I don't just want a position. I want a seat. Rachel frowned slightly. You mean? Yes, I said calmly. On the board. Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Let me talk to the others. That was the night I knew. The company that once ignored my application was now inviting me to run it. The boardroom at Hendricks & Rowe was everything I remembered. Tall glass walls, golden lights, and a long table big enough to fit egos instead of people. When I walked in that morning, the room was already buzzing. 12 executives, each representing millions in company stock, sat waiting. At the head of the table, Interim Chair Martin Geller adjusted his tie and gave me a polite, restrained smile. Ms. Evans, he said, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed your proposal. I took my seat. My heart was steady, but my hands were cold. This was it. The same company that once didn't even acknowledge my job application was now about to decide whether I belonged among them. Martin continued, your results as a consultant are undeniable. Our revenue has increased 27%, brand reputation up 40%. You've restored investor confidence. I nodded. Because we stopped chasing trends, I said, and started building trust. A few members murmured approval, but one man, David Lang, one of the oldest board members, leaned forward. He was the kind of man who still called female executives, dear. Ms. Evans, he said, voice dripping with condescension, while your achievements are impressive, you must understand, leadership requires experience, not momentum. You've never managed a corporation of this scale. I smiled politely. You're right, Mr. Lang. I haven't managed a corporation of this size. I've rebuilt one. A few of the younger members smiled. Lang's jaw tightened. Rebuilding and leading are different things. Not really, I said softly. Both require vision. The difference is, rebuilding starts with loss, and I've seen what loss looks like. When your brand was sinking, I didn't read about it in the paper. I lived it, fixing it day by day. The room went quiet. Martin cleared his throat. Let's discuss the actual proposal. I nodded. My plan is simple. We merge Evans & Company fully under Hendricks & Rowe's umbrella, but as a strategic partner division. I'll lead it as executive director. In return, I'll hold a permanent seat on the board. There it was, my move on the chessboard. David Lang scoffed. You want a board seat? Miss Evans, that's bold. Bold built your profits, I replied. And bold kept your investors from leaving. Rachel Lynn, the woman who had first supported me, spoke up. I second this proposal. Clara's leadership saved this company. She's earned the seat. A murmur spread around the room. Some nodded. Others hesitated. Martin looked thoughtful. We'll take a vote. My pulse raced as hands began to rise, one by one. Rachel's first. Then 3 others. Then another. But Lang, of course, stayed still. Finally, Martin raised his hand. Majority in favor. He smiled faintly. Welcome to the board, Ms. Evans. For a second, the world went silent. Then it hit me, the sound of victory that wasn't loud at all. I shook hands around the table, polite smiles exchanged. When I reached Lang, he hesitated before offering his hand. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied. I'll make sure we move faster than your doubts. A few stifled laughs echoed around the room. After the meeting, Rachel found me in the hallway. You did it, she said with a grin. You're officially part of the top floor. I looked at the gold H&R logo on the wall, the same one I used to dream about from my small apartment. I smiled. Not part of it, Rachel. I'm going to run it. That night, I called my mom. Mom, I said, voice trembling a little. Remember the company that didn't reply to my application? Yes, sweetheart. They just gave me a seat on their board. She laughed, half crying. Oh, honey, I knew they'd see it one day. I smiled. They didn't see it, Mom. I made them. 6 months passed after I joined the board of Hendricks and Rowe. The first few weeks were awkward. The old guard didn't quite know what to do with me. I was younger, sharper, and more digital than they were comfortable with. But comfort never changed anything. At every board meeting, I didn't just show up, I shifted the energy. Where they discussed profit margins, I talked about people. Where they saw numbers, I saw stories. Soon, the press started noticing. Hendricks and Rowe reinvented. The new face of modern leadership. From rejection to revolution. Those headlines weren't bought, they were earned. And inside the company, something else was changing too. Young employees who had once been ignored now had a voice. The HR department started recruiting from diverse universities instead of just elite schools. And for the first time in the company's 70-year history, a woman of color sat at the head of its board meetings. But victory isn't always applause. It's quiet, like standing alone in a room you once begged to enter. One afternoon, I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. Ms. Evans, someone here to see you. He says you'll remember him. When he walked in, my breath caught. David Lang. The man who had called me inexperienced, ambitious, too emotional for leadership. He looked older now, softer around the edges. He held an envelope. I'm retiring, he said simply. Effective immediately. I nodded, saying nothing. He glanced around my office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline, the board plaque on the wall with my name engraved. Clara Evans, Chairwoman, Hendricks and Rowe. You've done well, he said finally. Better than I ever expected. Thank you, I replied. But I didn't do it for your expectations. He smiled faintly. No, you did it despite them. For a long moment, we just stood there. Two people from different worlds, tied by one lesson. Time humbles everyone. When he left, I opened my laptop to sign a new merger proposal. It wasn't just any merger, it was the formal integration of Evans & Company into Hendricks & Rowe, now rebranded under one name. Evans & Rowe Global. The company that once ignored my resume now bore my name. As I scrolled through the digital document, I paused at the signature line. Authorized by Clara Evans, Chair of the Board. I stared at it for a moment. That single line, that signature, carried every night I'd cried over rejection, every insult, every "you're not qualified," every door that had slammed in my face. And with a steady hand, I signed. When the ink dried, I whispered, "Now, it's official." That evening, the company hosted a gala to celebrate the merger. The room sparkled with glass chandeliers and laughter, cameras flashing like constellations. A journalist approached me. "Ms. Evans, how does it feel, knowing they once ignored your application, and now you lead their board?" I smiled. It feels like they finally opened the door I decided to build myself. The crowd laughed softly. The cameras clicked. As I walked to the stage, I looked out at the faces. Young interns, senior executives, investors, partners. All of them listening. 5 years ago, I applied here and never heard back. At first, I thought that silence meant I wasn't enough. But I learned something. Sometimes silence isn't rejection. It's redirection. The room fell completely silent. I didn't get this position because someone gave it to me. I continued. I got it because I refuse to believe the world's definition of worth. And to anyone who's ever been ignored, overlooked, or told they don't belong, remember this. They can overlook your resume, but they can't ignore your results. Applause erupted. Flashbulbs burst. For a moment, I saw my younger self, sitting in that tiny apartment, staring at her inbox, refreshing it for a reply that never came. I smiled at her in my mind and whispered, "You made it."